Okay, there we go. I feel like there has been this very like rise and decline of our Zoom savvy. Like
Yeah,
if we were just like, what is this? And then we were all great at it. And now we're just like, how did we do this again? How did this work? I used to know, and I'm
yeah,
grateful
it's
for that.
definitely gone away a little bit.
But um it does come, it's not going anywhere, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
true.
it seems like you already touched on this a little bit. But just getting right into it, how you became involved with community development, and like I would say social justice work, in the
Hmm.
beginning.
Okay. Um, so interestingly enough, I feel like I don't know that I don't know that before I got to the Gun Foundation that I would have described myself as, working in community development, or I don't know that I even would have had like, language to describe it. But I think that I had worked primarily in education before this, providing direct service in schools, but I think I'd always cared deeply around the things that I would now call community development. I think I've just always, cared about places and people and how people build community, how they have agency over the decisions that happen in their communities, and the power and all the things that kind of go into community development. So I think it's kind of always been ingrained in me and kind of as community members, um, as neighbors, and as just good citizens. But I don't, like I said, but I don't know that I would have had the vocabulary to use until I got to the Gun Foundation as a fellow in 2013, when I would start, kind of saw the work that was happening at that level. And I was like, oh, there's a name to this, and it's community development. And I was like, oh. And so I think I just identify with that. Um, other piece of that, the justice and kind of the equity work that happens in this space was also something that, has always been important to me. But I think that, through my work as well, it's been more prevalent of late, but it's really just been it's just really been following a passion of mine. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of really cool jobs and a lot of really cool careers, and they're not all connected. People always are like, wait, you were a high school athletic director, uh, and I worked at the Federal Reserve for 5 years, and now I work in philanthropy and I give away money. And people are just like, what? And I'm like, I've just pursued all these interesting, I've been fortunate to have interesting opportunities presented to me. Um, and thankfully a wife who is supportive of me when I say, hey, I need to change jobs. I don't know where this is going to take me, but this is kind of where I need to be in the moment. So that's kind of how I got where I was. I mean, it was just serendipitous, and kind of just following that like feeling in your gut that like this is where you need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm interested in, um, well, first of all, it seems like it's not as much like changing what you do as changing your understanding of what you do, and that different things are like kind of operating in the same way or in a similar way. Um, and it seems like too, there's this idea of like community development is really a question of like procedural justice. Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, the interesting thing is that so much of I mean, my, as a human, like your views on things change and they evolve, and your understanding is always informed by the people that you meet and interact with. And so I feel like that's a really important skill that and kind of thing that just kind of stay grounded in and remember. So, but I think it also helps me inform the decisions that I make, in as a professional, particularly in this space. So yeah.
yeah. And I guess I'm interested in asking like if you think about if you can think of a moment in this journey and this kind of this like broad journey when you were like, yes, this is what I need to be doing.
Um, Isn't so I will say, um, had a couple, and I will say that it hasn't always been good. And I think this is also, I'm going to give a little bit of a critique about philanthropy because I think there's, some issues around philanthropy, around, how wealth has been extracted from communities and how that creates this really weird power dynamic exists when you talk about foundations or, philanthropic foundations. But I think for me, the aha or like that moment where I was like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing was, I guess when I've just recognized that, um, you know, I don't know anything more. I don't know any more than, you know, I'm not any smarter than anybody else. Um, but I have a platform. And I think it's one of those things where you think about, um, for good or bad, the fact that I represent an organization and I am responsible for giving away $5 million a year means that, um, people listen to me. They think my jokes are funnier than they really are. They think that I'm smarter. They give me credit for being smarter than I am. And so for me, there have been times when I've been able to bring people to tables that they didn't have access to. And to give people, I've been able to share my platform and to share my power. And when I see people who are the real experts being able to exert influence because of me being able to share that power, like that's the moment. Those are the moments where I'm like, yes, like that's when I'm making change. And it's not about, because honestly, like the grant making and like giving away money and that kind of stuff is like, it's cool. And I understand that it's a tool that we need to based on the way our society is built. But it's like when you really think about power sharing, that's the pieces that gets me excited, where I'm always like, oh wow. Like, or when you get on like I had a couple of times where like I'd be on, people asking me to be on panels and I'm like, I don't know anything, but when you can speak truth to power and you have influence and you know that that can help change the way that people operate, then it's like, yeah, that's it. That's what I need to do. Like that's how I can use this space to make sure that it's not just, you know, I don't like, I don't care about, I mean, I don't say I don't care about power, but I mean, like, I want to use my platform to elevate people who are closest to problems because they're the people who have answers to solutions. And so, for me, it's always about how can I be of service to the people who need to be in power.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if this is, I would say,
Yeah, no, I
sorry,
mean,
I'm getting on my soapbox. Sorry.
go in, poet. No, but I mean, it seems like kind of what you're identifying is like power is a means to an end. And maybe that end is like whatever, whoever's voice needs to be heard ultimately, not
Yep.
necessarily your own.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are, I'm an introvert by nature. I don't like being in the spotlight. Um, I also don't like conflict. I don't know how to say no to people. Like all these things are challenges of mine that I've like had to wrestle with, but um particularly coming back into this role, I I feel a real challenge of saying like, look, you know, I left philanthropy because I hated the way that the power imbalance played out in real life for people. And I was like, you know what? If I ever get back in, I'm going to change the way I'm going to operate differently than other people. And when I was back in, I'm just like, okay, here's my chance. Here's my chance to do things differently. Here's my chance to say, you know what? There are people who use their power in terrible ways or in bad ways. I should say terrible. I mean, I guess there are people who use it terribly. Most of the
Yeah,
people, most of the
fair
people I think
enough.
have, yeah, I think most of the people in this space use it or are well intentioned, but um, but I don't always agree with a lot of how my colleagues or people in this field operate. But I just said, look, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to be accessible. I want it to be transparent. Um, but I also want to make sure that I am like, I want to empower people who have the answers or who can figure out the answers and like get the hell out of their way. Like, I'm going to give them the money they need to do what they need to do. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to tell you what to do because I don't know. I'm not, I mean, like, I may have ideas about what I think communities need, but like, if I'm not in that community, I don't care how large my checkbook is. Like, anything I say is just speculation. Like, I want to give money to people who are close to the problem, who tell me this is what we need. And it's like, oh, here you go. Here's the money. I don't need to tell you what to do. I don't need you to report back on me and ask my permission. Like, do what you need to do. And I also recognize there will be times when people don't agree with me, and that like the people that we fund may not agree with me. And I think that's great. I think when we get to the point where we're not, so John has this interesting line where he talks about, Mitterholzer talks about how you've kind of arrived when you get to the point where organizations look at you as a partner and not just a funder. And it's not, and part of that is them being able to push back against you, and tell you, look, this is what we need. It's not what you want per se. And I'm like, man, that's where I need to get. Like, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for partners who can tell me what they need, and I can give them the resources they need, or I can connect them to resources, and then I'm going to get the hell out of your way until you tell me you need my help again. When you need my help, I'm going to try to help best I can, and I'm going to get out of your way again. Like I don't need to be heavy-handed. I'm like I said, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. Um, I'm not the bravest guy in the world, but I'm just like, okay, like I need to, I have an opportunity to help people. Um, I have a platform that people consider me important because of, like I said, because of the size of my checkbook. And I want to use that as much as I can to help people who haven't had that access to power.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, how do you be supportive without being directive?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess,
Am I answering any of your questions? I feel like
no,
I'm just
you're good.
rambling. I say.
Um, no, I wanted to ask if there's any projects that you are involved with or just see going on right now that do make you feel hopeful or to like signal maybe like a change in what's possible.
Um, hmm. Specific, I mean, I don't think there are specific, I mean, I would say right now there are a lot of projects that I'm hopeful of, but I think more than like individual projects, I think that it's uh, the thing that I'm hopeful for is like we have this generational leadership change that has happened, and like particularly in Cleveland, it's happening. We have a new mayor who is, you know, early to mid 30s. We have a new county executive. So in Cleveland alone, so we have a new mayor, we have a new county executive. We have in the last 2 years, our head of our Chamber of Commerce has changed. The Gun Foundation, which is the second largest foundation, we have a new president who's just over a year into his tenure. Um, a largest foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, their president is retiring in the fall, and so they're going to have a new They're going to have a new president. Um, it's like that's a lot of change for a community in one time. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
Yeah.
the county executive, the mayor, head of the Chamber of Commerce, two biggest foundations, and then there are other ones as well. Um, and there's such an energy that new leadership brings. Um, and it's funny because the city of Akron, which is not, Akron's not that far. I mean, Akron is going to have a new mayor, and granted, their mayor's only been there a short time, but they have a really young mayor or a candidate who um, is just really energetic. And so I just think about as you think about all of the baby boomers retiring and like whether it's Gen X or Gen Z or whatever generation is coming to power, it just I'm excited by people who have writ large, but you know, a lot of have just different ideas about the way that they want to see society function. And I mean, because that's another thing that well, I would say that's another thing I'm really interested in that like it's not in place yet, but I'm trying to figure out. So for my portfolio, where I'm at in strategy development is that I want to help build wealth and power for Black and Brown communities and other marginalized communities. Um, a part of that power is I also want to help um, with leadership development. And so it's thinking about, how do you identify next generation of leaders and giving them the platform? And, is it giving them, resources to just think and, can we give them, I'm fascinated with this idea with the MacArthur. They're not really called Genius Grant. I mean, their unofficial name is a Genius Grant, but like, they give people who are doing good work, like they give them way more money than I could ever do. But it's just like this idea. I mean, they give out like $800,000 over like a 4 or 5 year period, which is like crazy to me because my portfolio wouldn't allow me to do that. But I'm just like I love this idea of finding good people and just being like, hey, here's some money that would allow you to take care of whatever you need to take care of that's going to be able to allow you to be creative and thoughtful and inspired and like go change the world like that's the stuff right there. And so that concept is something that I'm like really wrapping my brain around is like how do we be 42, so no way am I old, but it's like I'm already thinking about like how am I bringing up people up with me? How am I reaching down and bringing up the next generation? How am I putting, you know, leaders like you and like your classmates and other people that are working with? Like, how are we creating space so that it's not a I mean, I think for so long, leadership, people have just had like you've had to wait your turn and you got to kind of bide your time and wait until like, you know, I'm like 85 years old and I'm senile. I can't really, and I can't, and I'm not fit to lead anymore. And then like, yeah, I reluctantly hand over leadership spot. And it's like, no, like, how people with me now? And how are we not waiting until you're 65 or seven, or whatever age it is, not waiting until, some age, you reach some age before you're qualified to be a leader. Yeah. So, I mean, so I think that's, the piece that I'm most excited about is the opportunity to change what leadership looks like, be a leader, and who's thought of as being a leader and who has the resources to support their aspirations. So that's what I'm most excited about. And I think that will play out in hopefully who I provide funding to, who we, bring to certain tables to make sure their voices are heard, or who create new tables.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like maybe you already answered this, but I guess I just want to pose it to you perhaps again is like, what do you hope to see your work contribute to or achieve?
Um, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because like part of me is like I want us to create I want to create a society that can't even fathom that like right now about that is like a truly equitable and just society. Um, that is so that like when you really think about it, is so wildly different than like what is anything that's we're close to. Um, and I think it means really, like I said, I think it starts with power. I mean, I think it all comes down to power. So what I would love to do is to broaden the base of people who have power, to help that, you know, you have power, and that and I think there's a connection to democracy and to voting and to saying like, look, like, how do how do, how does, your city council elections and your county council, and how does that roll up into something? And like, how do all of those pieces connect? Um, in some ways, it's like helping our nation uh, realize this beautiful language that the founding fathers described, that um, whether we think they believe it or not, that they believed it or not when they wrote it, like the language that's used to describe what our nation should be is incredibly beautiful. And so it's like, how do we get there? Even if that's not what they ever really meant. But it's like, okay, like we put this on paper, like let's make this happen. Like let's make this an equitable, just society. So I hope that we're a little closer. I don't know how I will quantify that, but it's one of those things where like you'll know it when you get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
that's so weird. I feel like a politician the way I'm talking. That's so weird. I'm sorry if I
You feel like what?
felt like a politician when I was just saying that. I was like, oh man. But hopefully I feel like it's, yeah, hopefully you understand it is genuine. Like I want to help people. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like, how can idealism be something more authentic than rhetoric?
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, dang. Okay, so we are about out of time, but I really do appreciate first of all just you taking the time um and yeah, just the thought that I can tell you put into this work, and then just your responses as well. Um
Is
so
this was this helpful? Do you think? I mean,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, so kind of the way this is gonna work is I will have the transcript from the interview, and we'll look through that and edit that a little bit, and just look for a couple of quotes that I want to pull out.
Okay.
And that's the content that we'll use. And then when that's all done and kind of like curated from this conversation, I will send that back to you and make sure that that's just representing your voice and your thoughts and your perspective in a way that you're comfortable with, in a way that feels
Okay.
authentic. Um, and then kind of what I would really like to get from you, if I can, is two things. So any images, because kind of the content that we try to create pairs a quote with an image. So that can be of you or you with folks that you work with, or just places that are significant to your work. We really look for like smiles, faces, but also recognizable like landscapes or locations. Yeah, familiar landmarks, all those kind of things.
Okay.
So if you could share that with me, that would be great. And then also any like contacts for folks who you think might be interested in, who are interested in doing similar work and might be willing to have a similar kind of conversation with me. We kind of go, from each person to through their network. So yeah, so if there's anybody who comes to mind who might be within that um, purview, that would be really
Yeah,
great. I would really appreciate it.
I will definitely do that. If you need anything else from me, I know you have my email. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything
Yeah.
at all. Even if it's another conversation, like we can find time, whatever it is, if you need. So
No,
I'm
I
more than
really
happy to.
appreciate that. And I may do that because I have a lot of a lot of questions I didn't get an opportunity to ask. But I guess the last thing I do want to ask right now, is just if there's anything you wish I had asked, or had known to ask, or that you would like to answer.
Nothing right now. I mean, I think yeah, I have one. I have, I'm happy to answer anything and everything. So, but nothing jumps out as like, oh, I wish you would have asked this. But like I said, if you have more questions, I'm happy to set up time. I'm happy to, or if it's like if we need an hour, like I'm happy to do that. I'm more than willing to be as
Yeah.
helpful as I can.
Yeah, I may do that, just seeing kind of who responds as well. But I really appreciate your time this morning. And I'll reach out to you and make sure, just get your consent with what we have already as well.
Sounds good.
yeah, and I look forward to anybody you recommend.
All
for
right,
sure.
I'll give it some thought and send someone over to you.
All right. Have a great rest of your
All
day.
right, well, thanks, you too.